Number 10. Nathaniel, Hendren, and Caitlin Alex. Former St. Louis, Missouri police officer Nathaniel Hendren was supposed to be on duty one evening in 2019 when he decided to blow off his responsibilities and drink at his house with another fellow officer, 24-year-old Caitlin Alex. His partner, Officer Patrick Reardon, was also there. At some point, Hendren and Alex began playing a Russian roulette-style game with a revolver that was loaded with one bullet. Reardon would later claim that his co-worker's behavior made him uncomfortable, so he left the room. As he was walking away, he heard a single gunshot. Hendren went first. The gun didn't fire, so he handed it to Alex, who pointed it at him and pulled the trigger. Once again, the gun didn't fire. Their luck ran out when Hendren took the gun back. This time it fired a bullet straight into Alex's chest. She was rushed to the hospital, where she died from her injuries. During an internal investigation, Hendren admitted that he and Alex were drinking that night, but denied using any illegal drugs. He maintained that he did not mean to shoot Alex and said that he was devastated about her death. The investigation also found that he was allegedly involved in an intense affair with his married co-worker. Hendren claimed Alex was planning to divorce her husband, who also happened to be a St. Louis cop. He ultimately pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Hendren was denied parole in 2022, which means that he'll have to serve out the rest of his term. Reardon was not criminally charged, but is no longer a police officer. He was ordered to pay $300,000 to Alex's surviving family members to settle a wrongful death lawsuit targeting both him and Hendren. Number 9. Christopher Police. Police Sergeant Christopher Police arrived at the scene of a disturbance outside a convenience store in Sunrise, Florida in 2021. He already seemed frustrated about what he expected to encounter. He approached as the responding officers struggled to get the suspect, Jean Similian, into the back of a squad car. In a disturbing outburst that was captured on body cam footage, police threatened to remove Similian's soul from his body and pointed his pepper spray at the suspect. Hoping to de-escalate the situation, a female officer pulled the sergeant away from the car, only to have police turn his aggression toward her by grabbing her neck and pushing her backwards into another police car. He then walked back to the vehicle where the suspect was being detained, slammed the door shut, and offered some harsh words to the officer, who intervened. The footage was leaked several months later, and police was put on administrative leave while an investigation played out. After finding out he was under scrutiny by his superiors, he sent text messages to the officers under his command, urging them not to air their dirty laundry to anyone outside the platoon. He would later be accused of downplaying the incident before he knew that body cam footage from the scene was under review. At that point, he allegedly claimed that he responded aggressively to the female officer because he didn't know who was touching him and thought they might be a threat. The department concluded that the female officer acted in accordance with its protocol, even if police didn't like her decision to step in when it seemed like he was getting out of control. In July of 2022, he was criminally charged with battery on a law enforcement officer, tampering with evidence, assault on a law enforcement officer, and assault against a suspect. He has since retired, and the criminal case appears to be ongoing. Number 8. Austin Walsh and Andrew Lawson. Andrew Lawson and Austin Walsh were best friends and roommates who shared an apartment in Palm Bay, Florida. They worked as deputies for the Brevard County Sheriff's Office. During a break from playing video games at home one Saturday night in 2022, Lawson jokingly pointed his gun at Walsh, thinking it was unloaded. But it wasn't, and he accidentally shot his closest friend in the face. According to an arrest report, Lawson pulled the trigger on his Glock 34 9mm pistol, then pulled the slide back and pulled the trigger a second time. In what can only be described as a worst nightmare come to life, he killed his best friend. Lawson immediately dialed 911 and was honest about what happened. It was clear to police and paramedics that he was genuinely distraught about Walsh's death. And while they believed it was truly a mistake, one thing Lawson should have learned in his law enforcement training is to never point a gun at someone unless you intend to shoot them. His recklessness, described by Sheriff Wayne Ivey as totally dumb and avoidable, landed him at the center of an ongoing manslaughter case. If convicted, Lawson could face up to 15 years in prison. Number 7. Deputy Wyatt Mesa. During the early morning hours one day in 2020, 23-year-old Deputy Wyatt Mesa and another officer responded to a single vehicle car accident in rural Idaho Falls, Idaho. At the scene, they encountered the distressed driver, 35-year-old Jenna Home. As the officers attempted to take Home into custody, Sergeant Randy Flegel drove up to the scene at a high speed and struck Mesa with his patrol vehicle. Mesa died from his injuries. Authorities attempted to hold Home responsible for the officer's death, even though she didn't kill him. Prosecutors alleged that she committed several crimes that inadvertently led to the tragedy, including waving a machete at a police SUV as it approached the accident scene. Under Idaho law, they argued that it was enough to charge her in connection with Mesa's death. Unable to afford bail, Holmes spent the next 19 months languishing in county jail on pending felony involuntary manslaughter and aggravated assault charges. She pleaded not guilty to the crimes, and the defense fought to get internal investigation records released so that the conduct of the responding law enforcement officers could be taken into consideration. The Bonneville Sheriff's Office fought against having to release the documents, and the case was ultimately taken to a higher court as Home fought to clear her name. Her attorneys argued that she had a machete with her for protection and that she only waved it briefly because she felt threatened as the deputy's vehicle approached. The defense blamed Mesa's death on Sergeant Flegel's high rate of speed as he arrived at the scene and claimed that the defendant's behavior was not a factor. A judge dropped the manslaughter charge in 2021, and Home pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor in connection with the case. Mesa's family was disappointed by the outcome, and they were also upset that Flegel was not criminally charged. Number 6. Undercover operation gone wrong. In an operation known as a push-off, 2 special ops officers from Detroit's 12th precinct loitered in the street while posing as drug dealers, waiting for potential customers to approach them. Around the same time, officers from the city's 11th precinct came by to raid a suspected drug house. Not realizing the men were undercovers, the cops ordered them to the ground. Complete chaos broke out as the rest of the 12th Precinct Special Ops Squad showed up, only for members of both precincts to draw their guns and start throwing punches at each other while the homeowner looked on. At some point, someone at the scene fired a shotgun into the air. The confusion eventually settled, and the 11th Precinct proceeded to carry out the raid. Footage of the incident landed on the desk of an internal affairs investigator, and everybody involved was questioned. The incident happened back in 2017, and it's unclear whether any disciplinary action was taken. During a news conference a few days after the fiasco went down, Detroit Police Chief James Craig described the incident as probably one of the most embarrassing things he had seen throughout his time with the department. He blamed the misunderstanding on poor communication and said that someone from the 12th Precinct had failed to inform the 11th Precinct that they would be in the area. Things like this were supposed to be prevented by new policies that were implemented after the tragic deaths of officers Jack Buffer and Mark Radden in 1986. Officer Buffer and his partner were carrying out a drug raid in plain clothes when Officer Radden and his partner, who were also in plain clothes, responded to a call about a shooting at the home. The 2 teams failed to recognize each other as cops and exchanged gunfire, killing both Buffer and Radden in a tragic case of mistaken identity. Number 5. Christopher Dorner. To say that U.S. Navy veteran Christopher Dorner's law enforcement career got off on the wrong foot would be an understatement. Shortly after he joined the Los Angeles Police Department in 2006, he accused his training officer, Teresa Evans, of using excessive force on a suspect. Dorner made the complaint shortly after Evans wrote in an evaluation that his performance needed improvement. The excessive force allegation was deemed to be false, and Dorner was accused of filing the complaint in retaliation for the poor review he received from Evans. He was fired from the LAPD in 2008. Over the next 5 years, Dorner unsuccessfully appealed the decision. His anger boiled over in early 2013 when he embarked on a days-long killing spree starting with Monica Kwan, the daughter of a former LAPD captain and lawyer who represented him in his appeal. He also killed a woman's fiancé, Keith Lawrence. After the double murder, Dorner posted a disturbing 11,000-word manifesto on Facebook declaring unconventional and asymmetric warfare on the LAPD and their families, unless the agency admitted it had fired him as a punishment for complaining about Evans. He listed the names of 40 LAPD employees and others who he blamed directly for the loss of his job, and said that he would not be alive to see his name cleared. The LAPD assigned protection to the targeted officers and launched a manhunt for Dorner. He shot at officers during 2 subsequent encounters in Corona, killing Officer Michael Crane and leaving others injured. 5 days later, authorities traced Dorner to a cabin in Big Bear Lake, about 80 miles, 129 kilometers outside Los Angeles, where he barricaded himself as law enforcement approached. During a violent final standoff, he shot at San Bernardino County deputies, killing Detective Jeremiah Mackay. After failing to persuade the disgruntled ex-cop to surrender, authorities discharged pyrotechnic tear gas canisters, which caused the cabin to catch fire. The blaze was too dangerous for firefighters to enter, and Dorner never emerged from the dwelling. An autopsy of his remains ruled that he died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Number 4. Houston Tipping. When 32-year-old LAPD officer Houston Tipping died during a training exercise at the department's academy in 2022, his family wanted to know exactly what happened. According to the Los Angeles coroner's office, Tipping was participating in a grappling exercise with another officer when the 2 men fell to the ground. Tipping landed on his neck and severely injured his spinal cord. To Tipping's mother, Shirley Huffman, this reasoning failed to explain some of her son's injuries. Deputy Medical Examiner Lawrence Nguyen, who performed the autopsy, said that some of Tipping's injuries came from the attempts to save his life. This included emergency surgery and the use of a device that performs mechanical chest compressions, which is known to cause rib fractures and liver injuries. In his report, Nguyen acknowledged that deaths at the hands of others are typically ruled as homicides, but that he ruled Tipping's death an accident after carefully considering the circumstances. Nguyen described tragedy as the type of thing that unfortunately sometimes happens in organized sports and exercises, and that the participants are typically aware of the risks. Unsatisfied with this explanation, Huffman lawyered up and filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city. Through her lawyer, Bradley Cage, she accused the LAPD of failing to protect one of its own and claimed that her son was killed in an exercise that was intended to simulate a mob. The lawsuit alleges that Tippings was struck in the head repeatedly to the point of needing stitches, that his neck was broken several times, and that other officers had questioned the particular training exercise that killed him after becoming injured themselves. And there are no records of the mechanical chest compression device being used in the efforts to save Tipping's life. During a press conference, Gage claimed that Tippings was beaten to death and that the LAPD's version of events doesn't tell the whole story. He also revealed that at the time of his death, Tippings was investigating serious assault allegations against 4 of his colleagues. At least one of the suspects in the assault case was present when he died. Tippings had reportedly started looking for another job after initially being happy as an LAPD officer. He didn't tell his family why, but they later said that he was clearly distraught over something. While the current status of the lawsuit is unclear, the LAPD has denied the allegations and has reassured the public that it's reviewing the case to determine if any steps need to be taken to prevent a similar tragedy in the future. Number 3. Mustafar Kumkur and Jonathan Shupe. Officer Mustafar Kumkur was training student officer Jonathan Shupe in 2020 when a traffic stop in Bothell, Washington went terribly wrong. It all started when a pair pulled over 37-year-old Henry Eugene Washington for not having a license plate. Washington initially cooperated, but fled the scene in his car. He struck a man on a scooter, crashed into a center median, and then exited the car and began walking away from the scene. Right after Kumkur and Shupe arrived at the crash, Washington turned around, approached the driver's side of the officer's SUV, and fired his handgun twice in their direction. According to a witness, he screamed, "Come on, pig," as he pulled the trigger. Kumkur, who was in the passenger seat, returned fire, accidentally shooting his partner in the process. Shupe died from his injuries. Washington fled the scene and hid on a rooftop, where he called the Junction City, Kansas Police Department to pass along the message to his family that he had shot a cop. He got stuck between two buildings while coming down from the rooftop and was taken into custody. Even though Washington didn't fire the fatal bullet, prosecutors concluded that he was responsible for Shupe's death and charged him with first-degree aggravated murder, first-degree attempted murder, and vehicular assault. In charging documents, King County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Mary Barbosa wrote that if it weren't for Washington's direct attack on the officers, Shupe would still be alive. Washington allegedly admitted to the crimes during questioning. He claimed he shot at the cops because he instinctively believed they were going to kill him and said that he was worried they would take away his car, marijuana, and gun. Shupe's brother, Evan, agreed with the prosecution's belief that his brother would still be alive if Washington hadn't shot at the officers. He said that his brother had spoken very highly of Kumkur and had a lot of respect for him, and the fallen officer's family made it clear that they did not fault Kumkur for the tragedy. Number 2. Michael Rusk. In January 2023, police responded to the scene of a shooting between two off-duty officers in Williamsburg, Virginia. The victim, identified by friends and family as 38-year-old James City County Deputy Christopher Gibson, was taken to the hospital with serious but non-life-threatening bullet wounds to the stomach and arm. His friend and fellow deputy, 24-year-old Michael Rusk, was taken into custody as the suspected shooter. The two men reportedly drank together for several hours at a tavern before the incident, which happened in a parking lot outside several local businesses. Sources claimed that an argument broke out between the two and that Rusk shot at the victim 3 times. He was charged with malicious wounding, using a firearm in the commission of a felony, and discharging a firearm within city limits, and is out on bond pending the outcome of the case. When the story broke, investigators said they were working to determine the extent to which alcohol played a role in the shooting. Rusk's attorney, Thomas Cleater, said that his client was devastated by what happened. He told local station WAVY that there's a lot more to the story than the public currently knows about, and that the details will come to light very soon. Cleater also said that the evidence will speak to the other side of the story. Rusk and Gibson appeared to have had a strong friendship prior to the shooting. In a Facebook post, Gibson described Rusk as one of the finest officers I've had the honor of working with. He also helped promote a car show to raise money for Rusk when he was battling cancer in 2022. Regardless of what went wrong between the two, it's disappointing that it led to potentially life-ruining violence. Number 1. Bailey Gannon. In July of 2020, Cleveland police officer Jennison Killnap and her partner, rookie cop Bailey Gannon, responded to a call from a woman who reported that an armed man was acting strangely and fired a bullet into the floor at a local boarding house. The officers arrived to find the suspect, Darrell Borden, in the bathroom with the door closed. According to prosecutors, Borden ambushed Killnap and Gannon with gunfire when they opened the door. A bullet struck Killnap's forearm, leaving her with long-term injuries that have prevented her from returning to work, and Borden was charged with attempted murder. An investigation by state authorities later determined that Killnap was shot by a bullet from Gannon's gun when he returned fire at Borden. In fact, the entire sequence of events went differently than initial reports claimed, according to a lawsuit Killnap filed against police and city officials in 2022. She claimed that Gannon opened the bathroom door without announcing his presence, or that he was a police officer. When he saw Borden standing there with a gun, he allegedly took cover behind a wall and then ran away, firing his gun over his head in Borden's general direction before the suspect took a single shot. The lawsuit accused Gannon of failing to try de-escalating tactics before resorting to gun use, and pointed the finger at the police department for failing to train him properly. Gannon was reportedly never disciplined for the incident and continued to be highly praised in performance reviews, yet Killnap was briefly suspended for failing to turn on her body camera. The status of the case is unclear. Thanks for watching. If a co-worker's well-intending but poor response to a threatening intruder left you with career-ruining injuries but also arguably saved both your lives, would you resent them for not being more careful to avoid hurting you? Let us know in the comments below and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.